Okay, very briefly, we're going to be talking from dreams to reality, policies, solutions, and actions. Now, just a few hashtags for you people to take note of as we go forward. The hashtag for everything we're going to be doing today and tomorrow is Shape Africa 2014. Shape Africa 2014. If you're on Twitter, if you're on Facebook, that's the hashtag to use. We also have a hashtag Bold Solutions. You can use that as well. We also have a hashtag West Africa. You can use that as well. If you want to also search, there's also where you can find some of the tweets and posts on Facebook. For this particular session, the hashtag is Shape Dreams for this particular session. And then, of course, we're also following the hashtag Bring Back Our Girls, which is basically just following the Nigerian situation right now with the girls who have been kidnapped up north. So we're also using that as well to show our support for everything that's happening. So those are the hashtags that you just need to take note of. Thank you. So we're going to start with you, Zainab. We're talking policies, talking dreams, from dreams to reality and all of that. You are from the Kano Hub, and something that's very sort of crucial to most of Africa, but also kind of unique to northern Nigeria is the issue of girl-child education, and things along those lines. It's something that's been talked about for a very long time. Where do you think we are with things? Are we still dreaming? Are we getting to a position where we can start, talking about things becoming reality with regards to girl-child enrollment in school and all of that?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me on this panel. And I'll briefly like to talk about first, before we go on, just about policies. I think a lot of our policies is about talking. I want to move on to the next part, which is about action. So just moving on to your question about girl-child, I can definitely say we are moving away from dreaming and moving on to solutions and actions. And about girl-child education, I think the challenges in terms of policies will be the way the policies are implemented. In terms of policies, when you talk about implementation, there are various ways you can go about it. Top-bottom approach, bottom-up. And I'm a big advocate of bottom-up approach. You have to engage people that these policies are going to affect. So in terms of education, we have to tailor the education to what the girl needs. I think that's my introduction, and I would like to see what solutions kind of take over.
That's pretty impressive. I was going to ask you, Charles, how different is it in Tanzania? What is the situation with, in Tanzania with regards to education, with policies, and what the dreams are, what the reality on ground is at the moment?
Hello?
Are we safe now?
Okay. Specifically looking at education and children or women, I think policies are there, but the biggest challenge is implementation. The implementation is a challenge right now, but there are a lot of initiatives. Over the last couple of years, I've seen a lot of initiatives that are coming. I think even some of the shapers are spearheading different initiatives themselves together with the Ministry of Education, and the Ministry of Education has become quite open to engage with the private sector, to engage with individuals who are willing to be part of that will to improve implementation of different activities. There has been a significant uptake of projects specifically looking at improving information, improving the education, specifically looking at girls. I think Nancy is here, who is actually doing something quite significant herself on reading, just as simple as reading and improving and ensuring that girls understand that they are strong, all the way from primary school. So I think in terms of implementation, we are getting there, but it's still a huge challenge in Tanzania. But again, I think compared to most of the other African countries, I mean, have more experience in technology rather than anything else, and I think technology has also been a bit of a challenge as well in Tanzania, with 11 to 15% actually using internet out of the entire country, or the availability of that technology itself. So those are challenges that I think we are addressing now, and the government, private sector, and individual are all significantly involved in seeing how exactly that can be improved.
Okay, you work in media, and most times we find out, like you said, a lot of these policies are actually in place across Africa, but there seems to be a disconnect sometimes. People don't even know what the policies are. How well do you think the media is doing in their role in all of this?
I think I'm going to have to correct that. You said most of the policies are in place in Africa. I'm not sure I agree with that. And
he said that the policies are not the problem, it's implementation.
Well, I think it's actually two ways, and I will tell you why. For instance, now, if you talk about issue of taking off a bit away from girl-child education, if you talk about female entrepreneurship, for instance, I'm challenging everybody here to check. We currently do not have any policy at the regional level, from African Union to ECOWAS, on young female entrepreneurship. And if you look at it from a large, let's narrow down to Nigeria, for instance. The most recent statistics in Nigeria shows that we have young women below the age of 35 that are unemployed. And to think that we don't have any policy that speaks to the situation is a major problem. So I'm not sure I agree with you when you say that. But then, looking at it from a general point of view in terms of the media, to a large extent, I'm not sure the media guys are doing enough. Because if you look at the health bill, using Nigeria again as an instance, it took years for them to be able to pass that bill. It took them years to get the policy in place. It took years for them to pass. I mean, they've been on it for over 5 years. And even up till now, and that's still not 100% in place. So in terms of saying the media is doing a lot, no, we still have a long, long way to go, generally on policy.
Okay, Neilon, you work with a non-governmental organization and you work with a lot of African countries. What has been your experience with policy with regards to formulating them and before we even get to implementation?
All right, so I'll explain quickly. I work for the One Campaign, which raises awareness of poverty issues and solutions to fighting poverty. And historically, we've worked in America and Europe to change their policies towards Africa. And 3.5 years ago, or 4 years ago, One decided to hire my boss, Dr. Sipho Moyo, Zimbabwean, to start an Africa team where we could engage African organizations and African institutions and African governments on changing their policies for the people. And Dr. Moyo, she was supposed to be here, but unfortunately couldn't come. But I think the first thing she would say, and that we would like to say, is we often found that African governments too often listen to donors and investors before they actually listen to their own people. Even where you have good democracy and some institutions in place, you find that the governments aren't actually heeding to what their citizens need. So One has explored and has been working with partners on the ground in Nigeria and Tanzania on trying to impact some specific solutions in those countries. And our team has specifically worked on agriculture for the past few years. Some of you may be aware of our campaign right now called Do Agric, It Pays. It is trying to make agriculture look cool to young people and to citizens of Africa, but it's also trying to put pressure on African leaders and institutions to follow through on their commitments. Your governments make commitments all the time, but there aren't enough people keeping track and keeping them accountable. So we're really trying to work with in-country partners to make sure that the governments listen to them. And I think that's the big, bold area in the next few years is, and my big dream for Africa is you won't have any more of the Oxfams and Save the Children and even Ones, in your countries, but it's going to be the citizens of Nigeria, citizens of Tanzania, the Senegal stepping up and getting results from their government. That's what we really want in the next few years.
Well, Charles, one of the biggest issues that keeps coming up whenever we talk about things like this is, holding government accountable. How do you get them to, do or walk the talk? what are some of your experiences with, things like that, especially in your country? Is it as easy as people think it should be, where you can actually enforce or push government to do certain things? How does it work? And how do we move from being, are we apathetic, do you think?
The one thing that I can comment is, number one, when donor funding is coming in Africa, it usually comes with rules. You have to do this, you have to do this, you have to do this. So automatically, if you don't do this, you won't get the right funding that you're looking for. And I think even the model of funding that is actually coming to Africa has changed over the last couple of years. So that makes it easier for donors or external organizations or NGOs to actually have most of what they need done, or most of what their objectives are to be implemented first than anybody else. That's one. The second thing is, for locals, for Tanzanians, specifically looking at Tanzanians, that audience is usually quite difficult to get. You have to look at getting to the level of getting your voice heard by the government or senior officials and whatnot. However, regardless of all those challenges, I believe where things are going now, and I think not only in Africa, because I've seen in different countries, right now in Tanzania, there are different groups that are working with specific ministries. I'm working with the Commission for Science and Technology significantly to look at how to improve the mindset of young people in technology specifically. Not just looking at when I finish school or when I finish university, I look for a job. But what do you have? You have to have that mindset of, I can actually open my own company. I can understand one thing or the other, more than just the technology that I'm learning. And we didn't even end there. We went into more agriculture, looking at all these things that can actually be supported by technology, by education, by changing the mindset, even of the teachers, the universities. So we work directly with the universities as well to see how can they also impact that mindset change, because it's a mindset change. Right now, you go to school, they think, I'm going to learn this, I'm going to learn this, and then I'm going to get a job. And the challenge with that is there aren't enough jobs. Over 20,000 students finish the year and you get 10,000 jobs. Yeah,
it's something that keeps coming up a lot. And I want to come to you, Zainab, now. We've talked about, the mindset, but how much of it is also cultural, do you think? We live in a continent where there's sort of a hierarchy with, it's called ageism. Your elders are speaking, you're not supposed to interrupt. And we've had that case where, young people find it very hard to get involved in anything and even have a say. So how much of all of this is cultural, do you think, with age and even with gender?
Well, just before I go on to your question, I wanted to address something you said earlier about accountability. I think a lot of policy, we can't talk about policy without talking about accountability and how we hold our leaders accountable. And the other thing you mentioned is media. So I think these two can be put together. Is there anybody from Uganda here? No?
On the way, they're on the way.
Okay, there's this report I read about from Uganda. It's called U-Report. It's about really how the media can play a role in holding the government accountable. And what it does is say the politicians promise that they're going to deliver social textbooks or social facilities to schools. And the media asks these children from a particular region to report. It's called U-Report. So they report directly, and then there's an analysis. So did you actually get what the government promised you? Yes, no. And then this is published every month. And then, because there's so much attention drawn to it, the government are kind of forced to act. So I think with global shapers, these are kind of the bold solutions we can take to holding our government accountable and how we can use new technology to move forward. And just, what can you ask again?
About cultural...
Oh yeah, about cultural thing. I think a lot of it is very applicable. It's definitely valid. The culture plays a role. It's interesting you asked it because I was just talking about this yesterday and how people it's difficult to kind of separate professional work from getting the boundary where culture stops and where informal activity stops, so where professional interaction starts. But I think with time, we're moving away. Like Yemi said, 70% of Africa now is under 30. So we definitely are on the way to having our voice. And what we fight for Global Shapers is having our voice heard. What do we want? What do we want? So we have to fight to shape these policies that we're talking about and having a voice on the table. And I quote Chidiogo again. Thank you.
Well, Neil, something has been in the African media or sort of airspace in the last couple of weeks. Do a Greek. And I know the one organization has been a big, huge part of that. What is that about, and how is that supposed to change all of this talk about, unemployment and all of that?
Hello, is this working? Yeah, I think so. So it has two aims. As I said earlier, first of all, so we did a big music production with Devanj and a host of other. So we did a music video with Devanj and 18 other artists from all corners of the continent, where it's trying to make, where agriculture is cool, and that cocoa becomes chocolate, and that more of that refining and value addition needs to be happening in African countries and not just sending cocoa beans to Switzerland or Belgium, wherever they go. So that's the one part, is popularizing it and making people realize that, no country, you could probably correct me, but most of modern countries have developed coming from an agricultural base. And until Africa will get to leapfrog that, I'm sure, but for now, it has a huge potential opportunity to provide income and jobs, to 70% of African citizens. So we're trying to make agriculture look cool and to get away from, when I was in Tanzania, I was told the word farmer is actually used in Swahili to describe poor people. You could correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't know the word. But when they told me that, our partners there, I was like, when you're told you're poor, they say you're a farmer in Swahili. And we got to get away from that idea, because I come from a farm in the States, and that's where great countries and societies rose up from, and Africa can too. So it's popularizing it and making people try to see farming and agriculture as different, and using that interest, hopefully driving interest in popularizing agriculture, in signing our petition that we're delivering at the African Union Summit in Malabo in June. So 11 years ago, all of the African heads of state committed to spend 10% of their budget, of their national budgets on agriculture. And only 8 countries have done it sustainably, and I have managed to maintain that. And we're trying to get African governments to keep that commitment and spend more money, but spend it transparently, spend it on the solutions that the people need in their country. Solutions in Nigeria don't apply to solutions in Tanzania. So that has to keep in mind. But what we're trying to do is get these governments to sign on and then make commitments and beat them over the head so that they keep those commitments and see real change on the ground.
Additionally, we hear these things and it sounds like a great idea, but the truth is, like you said, agriculture or farming is not necessarily, excuse my word, sexy for a lot of young people. It's not the sort of job you want to do, getting your hands really dirty. How can we as global shapers tap into that sort of a bold solution, to spread the word better?
Yeah, before I respond to that, I'm going to talk about what he spoke about earlier. He actually said people listen to donor agencies more than they listen to their own government. That is a problem. And we need to start thinking about bold solutions. We need to think about how to resolve that. Why do I need to listen to an outsider more than I listen to my own government? Then another thing Zainab said that I want to add to is the issue of holding media accountable. I think to a large extent, people people don't seem to be waiting for the media anymore. I mean, we have the tools, so then we now report things ourselves. And that's why the social media is there. That's why today, in the last, few days, we have the hashtag Bring Back Our Girls trending in Nigeria. That's why when there was bomb blast yesterday in Kenya, that's why we had it trending around that area, because nobody seemed to be waiting anymore. So to a large extent, it's a wake-up call for the media guys as well, because now you know whether you do it, if you don't do it, people are going to do it. So it's up to it's up to the media guys now, from a realistic point of view, to look at a situation whereby they would now be able to provide accurate information. So, and when you don't provide accurate information, you can be sure that citizens will do that themselves. And so then back to the question on agriculture.
I said, how do we make it attractive? How can we as global shepherds actually make it attractive enough for young people to see the opportunities there?
I think one campaign has actually set the pace, because bringing up celebrities from across Africa to run that advert has actually, in a way, has tried attracting attention. And narrowing down to Nigeria again, looking at the Minister of Agriculture and having the minister wake up overnight and become funkified, going on social media, dressing like a young person, and trying to help everybody see that, look, agriculture is not as dirty as we all think it is. I think to some extent has really helped. Then aside from that, the fact that we now have role models, young people who are really, really into agriculture and they're doing well. And they've been coming out, they've been talking about it, the success. We have someone like Ndidi Uweli who now exports agricultural produce from Nigeria to other African countries. We have someone like Musumola Umoru who is known as Pretty Farmer, and she's doing so well with it. The fact that we see them seem to be encouraging young people. And in addition to that, we now have institutes, agricultural institute that is encouraging young people. So I think what we can do as part of our action plan is to look at a situation whereby we help young people see that, look, it's not just about blue-collar jobs, which I think lots of young people now understand. To a large extent, it's more of becoming an entrepreneur. And to become an entrepreneur, it doesn't have to be. Agriculture is huge, and it's still untapped, fully untapped, and it's something young people can just get into.
Well, Charles, I know your passion is IT, and it's one of those industries that on the continent has kind of grown out of nowhere and has gotten a life of its own. Places like Nairobi are big on IT. Lagos is coming, Johannesburg. How has that managed to happen? And how can we tap into that sort of, the experience of the revolution sort of that's happening across the continent with hubs and information technology?
I think one of the value add about Africa, not just Tanzania or Kenya or just a specific country, is we don't have legacy systems. So today New York, if New York decides to change the systems of the airport, they can't. They're still using the system that they implemented many years ago because they can't switch off and switch on a new one. It's impossible. So they have to run new systems, but the old systems always have to be there. And we don't have such a problem like that because we didn't have these old systems. So automatically we are jumping, we are leapfrogging certain levels that other people have already done. We're going into e-government now. There are a lot of things that Africa is doing, and it's only learning about the challenges that other people have already done them, and they're just passing through. So the one thing that has helped significantly, we don't have legacy systems in Africa. Most of the things you have to get the systems which are new, there's a lot of content, but it's not digitized. All the way from education, agriculture. Right now there's a lot of organizations, like what he is just explaining now, that are taking content and putting it, digitizing it, so that it can be available, it can be accessed. A farmer telling a farmer to sit on a computer, to do things on the phone, it's a challenge and a half. It's a challenge and a half because they don't believe it. Not only that, the devices is a challenge as well. The phone, they have a feature phone which doesn't even have data. So there are a lot of things. The best thing that Kenya did, I don't know if there's anyone from Kenya here, but the operators, what they did is they forced the market. They forced the market, they forced the vendors, the Samsung and Nokia and whatnot. They defined the price of higher phones, they define the prices of feature phones, the basic phones. So automatically when they push the price, when they subsidize the price, themselves. They don't tell them to change the price, but they subsidize the price, they buy a lot of them, they subsidize the price, and they push it to the market. So people don't go buy to them. People go and buy to their shops automatically, and became a huge force. So when they communicate a certain price, all the other shops, all the other manufacturers' centers, they have to push down their price to match what the operators are doing. And because Safaricom is big, it engages with the government, and the government listens. So it's a huge opportunity. The private sector decides to say, this is what we need to do. There are no fake phones in Kenya anymore. So that model has worked fantastic to enable a lot more people to have feature phones, to have data phones, data-capable devices, and to deliver content. So, and I think Zuku is part of that initiative, which Zuku from Kenya has done amazing work, whereby now I think folks and whatnot, they want to buy that content so that they can distribute it across Africa and across other continents. So the biggest issue is how can we get most of the local African content digitized to be able to be delivered? Because even if we make them get the feature phones, but what are they going to do with it if the content is not there? So there are a lot of things that technology will play a part, that is playing a part now, and with a lot of support from organizations like his, are significantly supporting, and the governments are significantly part of that M agriculture, M farming, M mobile, that I think it will add significant value, and technology is playing a huge part on that front.
Well, Zainab, the truth is, I'm listening to all of this, and most of it, I'm sure for a lot of you, is not necessarily news. We know all of these things. We know that this is what Africa is about. We know that these are things. So we're talking bold solutions here, and it seems like we sort of know the solutions, but the bold solutions that we need now are how to go from talking to actually doing. Where are we missing the point in everything? Even as we as young people, what are we doing wrong, and what is government, what do we need to do?
Well, first of all, I think we're starting to do things right with global shapers, and a lot of global shapers is about thinking globally and acting locally. So we take what we talk about and see how we can implement it in our local regions, our communities, and our states. You talked earlier about agriculture. How do you make agriculture fancy? How do you make it cool? And I remember when I was in secondary school, I had a farm behind my classroom. In the morning we'll go to the farm first before we go into class. And if you make this integral part of education, integral part of normal life, it carries along. There is a shaper who is a farmer who I met in New York, Cheryl. She's from Philippines. And you should all look her up. She's amazing. She's a farmer, and she makes it look cool. So if you get people like that to engage with the youth and realize that farming could be cool, or agriculture could be cool, I think that's a step forward. The other thing I think we should integrate is tailoring our education to what is actually needed, what's needed on the market. So take, for example, Nigeria. We want agriculture to boom. This GDP we talk about, rebasing the economy, a lot of it is agriculture. So we have to tailor education to address these issues. If you go to university today, maybe you'll find one or two courses that pertain to agriculture. A lot of it is not relevant to maybe business, finance. I'm not saying that's not relevant, but that's not relevant to tailor towards what we actually need in the market. So I think the youth, 70% that we talk about, need to have a table and say, look, these are the issues we need to address. And moving on, back in 2011, I was invited to be part of a roundtable discussion to advise the state. And these are areas we can kind of look towards having a seat on the table and having changes that we want, and moving on from there. Thank you.
We're going to go to the audience now and take a few questions. If you have any questions, questions before comments. We'll take questions first, then.
I do agree that we do have policies, and I agree with you that there are gaps in the policies we have. But for the policies we have, we don't have implementation. education. And I think one of the reasons is because there's no joined up thinking. So you've already mentioned the
Sorry, there's no one?
joined up thinking. So you've already mentioned the disconnect between the government and citizens. And you talked about like bottom-up solutions and things like that. How do we as shapers start to bring together joined up thinking towards implementing projects or some of these issues?
Adesha, you want to take that?
I believe the whole essence of our gathering here for Shape Africa 2014 is for us to be able to come up with bold solutions. And one of the things we can resolve in terms of coming up with bold solutions is for us to come up with action points that will take back to our various countries. And in taking that back to our various countries, from our local communities, it's easy for us to come together as a group, as global shapers, look at the issues, look at the challenges and the solutions that we want to prefer, and strategize on how to move forward on it. Now this is the truth. What will work, just like you rightly said, what will work in Nigeria is not likely to work in Uganda, and neither is it going to work in Kenya, or is it going to work in South Africa. But then we understand our community more than any other person. So we come up with the solutions, we look at our structure. That's why it's important for us to do situation analysis along the line and see how this will solve the problems.
If he wants to say something.
I just want to ask, how many shapers are employed by your governments in your civil service? Are any of you working for the government, the civil service? I see one. I see a few. Great, there we go. So see, I personally feel like I'm really impressed by all the shapers, and like you need some shaper thinking going into your governments to find these bold solutions and implement the bold solutions, because let's admit, governments all over the world are bureaucratic nightmares. Even I'm American, or bureaucracy, but especially in Africa, you got to shake it up. It needs to be done, implemented.
We have any questions? Let's take Yawa.
Good morning. My name is Yawa Hansen Kwao from the Accra Hub in Ghana. I have two questions, all on the theme of agriculture. My first question is to the representative from One. I understand the value in creating hype around agriculture being cool and a sector that more and more young people should engage in. But I think that there might be more work to be done in other areas. For example, the land tenure system, being able to acquire land in many African countries, it's difficult. The other thing being the issue of infrastructure. So there are parts of Ghana that grow tomatoes and pineapples, etc. And I think 60 to 70% of their product is lost due to spoilage because they don't have storage facilities, and they also can't move the product to where it's needed. So those are more infrastructure issues. So I'm tempted to say that a lot of the resistance to get into agriculture.
Hello, it's working. I've spoken very high level. As policy recommendations that deal with land tenure, to infrastructure, to extension services, to education for people who are closing the gender gap. Women are actually the most number of farmers. They can't get land, and they can't access to credit to do that. So it's a very high level. Trying to say that. Okay, so I was just trying to say that I've spoken very high level of the campaign, but it has a whole host of policy recommendations that have been signed on by, I think, over 120 different African civil society organizations from all over the continent. We were just at the Ministers of Agriculture convening in Addis Ababa last week, getting sign-on. So again, not every solution is for every country, but countries need to pick and choose. And you're right, there's a whole host of roadblocks and barriers to farming, from not being able to transport, to getting the credit, to knowing, just having the local knowledge of which products or which plants and rice should be planted in the place. So yeah, so that is there, but I didn't speak about that because I didn't want to get into the policy part. On genetically modified, I will just say, like, from our position, it's not us it's not for one to tell the countries what to do. Like, African countries the citizens should decide what they're comfortable with. It's a big, huge raging debate, and I'm gonna stay out of it because I'm sure everyone has a different opinion of it. But yeah, I'd love to hear thoughts of the panelists if they have thoughts.
Just to respond quickly to both points. The first one is about infrastructure, and a lot of it is power in terms of agriculture. And I think shapers play a role there. We can kind of take up solutions that come up with sustainable solutions such as solar energy, hydropower, but specifically solar, I think that's more implementable at a small scale. The second one is about genetically modified products. And it's interesting you bring that up because there's a lot of debate globally about this. And there are two kinds, genetically engineered, genetically modified, interchangeably. But I think the problem with introducing genetically modified products to any country is control. And it's in countries where you don't have a lot of control, there is a danger that you can lose control of these. And when you're talking about genetically modified products, you don't know the effects in the next 20 years. That can be scary to say, let's start doing this. But I think that there are areas that we can do it. A lot of it is about what effects it will have on our health, say if we take genetically modified products. But there are other areas that can be like, say, cotton. Other countries like China do it. It's not going to have an effect directly because you're not eating it. So these are areas where we can kind of look into where you can introduce genetically modified animals. You can save a lot of waste because a lot of people will invest in a lot of money, but because of the damage that's done to the cotton fibers, I'm no expert at this, it gets destroyed along the way. So I think we kind of have to tailor it to what is applicable, like you always said, to the country, and be wary of the limitations we have in each country when we're implementing.
I haven't said anything perfect, so.
To comment on how government can step aside a little bit it can be a bit of a challenge because most of the time, most of the countries, especially in Africa, you can find that the biggest spender is the government. The biggest spender is the government. Even if you take let's say you mentioned the Silicon Valley business model, but at the end of the day, the biggest spender of technology is the government as well. I mean, in Tanzania, I know, I think 49% of technology spend is coming from the government. And I think it's something similar to most of the other African countries. And I think the biggest challenge of making agriculture attractive, for instance, is not really about creating these angel investors and whatnot, but angel investors will always invest to someone who's already there. Even if it's a bank, even if it's whoever, they will invest to someone who's already gotten their hands dirty because they believe that that person has less risk. So the challenges that I think that there are there is the people who are already there, the young people who are already there, they're not, we don't know them, but they're there. I believe they're there. And there are different models. The ones that I actually know, they're actually younger than me or my age or slightly older than me. But they have a model. They have not moved to areas where they're actually doing the farming. They're actually living in the cities. They're doing their farming. They know how to manage it. They know how to monitor everything. They understand exactly what they need to do. And they have the right people employed in those areas to make sure that everything is managed properly and whatnot. I mean, there are different groups of young guys that I know that have done something similar as well. Not in Tanzania, actually, but in Malawi. But the challenge comes still the same. They're not as loud to explain how they've done it, what model they've used, and what has been successful to them. And I think that platform has never really been there. But I think as global shapers, how can we actually get there? How can we do that? We have a shaper that's in agriculture. How can we communicate? How can we get that story out there? That this is what the shaper is doing in agriculture. This is the model that they've done. This is where it's taken them from here to here. To also comment something else on the lady here. The other challenge about not including the government in anything is governments usually already have master plans for technology, for agriculture, manufacturing, everything. And they have teams that are looking at what are the technology capabilities that we have and what are the technology capabilities that we need to get to. So these master plans, these write-ups, for that matter, they are there, the policies are there. But the challenge is, I think we also don't know them. We can, as the bold solutions, we can actually tap in. We'd rather find out what are those master plans and all of us tap into that. Private organizations tap into that master plan. Someone who's looking after infrastructure. What that master plan, as what he was explaining, that master plan, the area that is looking after infrastructure, different organizations who want to tap into, who want to do something when it comes to agriculture can tap into the infrastructure part of the master plan and do there. But right now, I think if you've noticed in different countries, there are different international organizations, different local organizations, all of them are doing different things which are also part of the master plan. They are things which are in the master plan, but they are doing it as individuals. They may work with the government, but they are not working as part of that master plan. So you can find 3 organizations doing exactly the same thing at different locations, different models, and you can find in the same country. So I think one of the value add would be, how can we enable that master plan to be available to the relevant organizations, to the relevant private citizens who want to understand how to get that assistance with the government, so that even the government can also understand how the model would work better. They can monitor or moderate the model that these guys are doing, that those other guys are doing, and see how can they be implemented in different areas.
All right.
And if somebody else comes in,
I know you're very passionate about this, so but I have to cut you right there. We're going to just quickly take closing notes from all of you. I know Africa seems to be a continent with a lot of visions. There's a vision 2020 for Nigeria. I think Kenya has 2030. Tanzania, we have 2025 or something. 2063 for Africa, exactly. We have all of these visions. But we're going to tap into that visionary, note. I want to ask all of you just on a final note. In 5 years, at Shape Africa 2019, what do you want to see them discussing? What Africa do you want to see at that point?
Well, just to kind of conclude on a note, I think in 2015, you said? We want to be talking, 2019, that's a long time. We want to be talking about, rather than having youth on the table, more about, okay, we're already on the table, what are we going to be doing on the table? Rather than having exclusive public or private, having partnerships. And also strategic solutions, like Yemi said. I think that's my closing note for the day.
Charles, very quickly.
I think for me is, how can we scale what we've already done? How can we make it bigger? How can we make sure that it is available everywhere? I think that's where we need to go.
Thank you very much.
Well, for me, I believe by 2019, I want to see a situation whereby most of the countries in Africa have been able to fulfill the dreams of our founding fathers, the visions of our founding fathers for Africa.
I would say I would love to see where you have a problem with talking about there being too much food, and what to do with all the food and how you're selling it all over the world and making prices so low for the rest of the world that it's a great thing and it's something Africa really could do in, I don't know, 5 years, but definitely be on the trajectory for that in 5 years.
That's very true. I just round up by saying I think regional integration is something that we should also start looking at as well. I think the West African region has pioneered that. We have a borderless sort of region where people move across freely. Even though I have some Ghanaians who are in Nigeria for the first time, shame on you. And I think some parts of East Africa as well also about to do that. I mean, 3 or 4 countries in that region. It's something we should start looking at. We're know we'll have a lot of problems to still tackle before that, security, and all of that. But yeah, hopefully, maybe not in 5 years, but the future should look bright. So thank you very much, guys. Your hands together for them, ladies and gentlemen.
Ladies and gentlemen, to do a recap of the first plenary